Rain fell in sheets across the Arizona desert, turning the dusty streets of Old Tucson into rivers of mud. And it was there that Vincent Palmer first saw the woman kneeling in the downpour with her hands clasped and her face turned toward the darkened sky. The sight stopped him cold, his horse shifting nervously beneath him as thunder rolled across the mountains in the distance. Most sensible folks had taken shelter an hour ago when the storm clouds gathered, but this woman remained outside alone, her dark hair plastered to her face, and her simple calico dress soaked through. Vincent had been riding hard for 3 days straight, exhausted and hungry, but something about the intensity of her prayer made him dismount without thinking. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her, but she seemed so lost in her communion with God that she did not notice him at all. The rain hammered down harder, and Vincent could hear fragments of her words carried on the wind. She was begging for help, for guidance, for some sign that everything would be all right. Her voice cracked with emotion and desperation, and Vincent felt something shift deep in his chest. He had not prayed in years, not since the war had taken his brother and left him with nothing but questions that seemed to have no answers. But standing there in the rain, watching this stranger pour her heart out to heaven, Vincent found himself kneeling beside her in the mud. He did not know what compelled him to do it, only that it felt right somehow. The woman's eyes flew open, wide and startled, and Vincent got his first clear look at her face. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with vanity, her features strong and honest, her gray eyes filled with such raw vulnerability that it made his breath catch. "I did not mean to intrude," Vincent said, raising his voice to be heard over the storm. "But you looked like you could use some company." The woman stared at him for a long moment, rain streaming down both their faces, and then something in her expression softened. "Are you praying too?" Vincent hesitated, then nodded. "I am now." They knelt together in silence for several minutes, the rain soaking them to the bone, and Vincent felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. Peace, maybe, or at least the promise of it. When the woman finally rose to her feet, Vincent stood with her, and they looked at each other like two people who had just shared something sacred and strange. "I am Grace," she said, extending her hand. "Grace Rodriguez, Vincent Palmer." He shook her hand, noting the calluses on her palms and the strength in her grip. "What were you praying for, if you do not mind my asking?" Grace's expression clouded over, and she glanced back toward the small church at the end of the street. "My father is dying. The doctor says there is nothing more he can do. I was asking God for a miracle, though I know that might be foolish." Vincent felt his heart constrict. "It is not foolish. Faith is never foolish. You really believe that?" Grace asked, searching his face with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "I am starting to," Vincent admitted. "I lost my faith a long time ago, but maybe it is time I found it again." Grace smiled then, a small sad thing that nonetheless lit up her entire face. "Come inside and get dry. It is the least I can do for someone willing to pray with a stranger in a storm." Vincent followed her to a modest house on the edge of town, his horse trailing behind them. The rain had finally begun to ease, tapering off into a steady drizzle that felt almost gentle after the deluge. Grace led him through a wooden gate and onto a covered porch, where she paused to wring out her hair. Vincent did the same with his hat, water pouring off the brim in a small waterfall. Inside, the house was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and furniture that looked handmade. A fire burned low in the hearth, and Vincent could hear someone coughing in a back room. Grace's expression tightened at the sound, worry etching lines around her eyes that seemed too deep for someone so young. "How old is your father?" Vincent asked gently. 52. He caught pneumonia last month and it just kept getting worse. The doctor says his lungs are too damaged now. It is only a matter of time." Grace's voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she moved to stoke the fire. "And your mother, she died when I was 12. It has just been my father and me since then." Grace straightened and turned to face him. "I should get you some dry clothes. You will catch your death standing around in those wet things." Vincent wanted to argue that he had been through worse, but the concern in Grace's eyes stopped him. She disappeared into another room and returned with a shirt and trousers that must have belonged to her father. They were a bit loose on Vincent, but they were dry and warm, and he changed gratefully while Grace did the same behind a privacy screen. When they were both dressed, Grace made coffee and they sat at the small kitchen table. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving behind the clean smell of wet earth and the sound of water dripping from the eaves. Vincent found himself telling Grace things he had not spoken of in years. About his brother Samuel, who died at Gettysburg. About their small ranch in Texas that had burned down during a drought. About the years he had spent drifting from town to town looking for work and purpose. Grace listened with her full attention, asking questions that showed she truly cared about his answers. In turn, she told him about growing up in Old Tucson, about learning to run the family mercantile after her mother passed, about the weight of watching her father slowly fade away, and knowing there was nothing she could do to save him. "I feel so helpless," Grace confessed, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. "I have always been able to fix things, to find a way forward, but this is beyond me. All I can do is pray and hope." "Sometimes that is all any of us can do," Vincent said, "but you are not alone anymore." "I do not know why I stopped today, why I felt compelled to pray with you, but I am here now. Let me help." Grace looked at him with those penetrating gray eyes. "You do not even know me." "No, but I would like to." Vincent held her gaze, feeling the truth of his words settle into his bones. "I have been lost for a long time, Grace. Maybe I needed to find you as much as you needed someone to pray with you." A faint cough from the back room broke the moment, and Grace rose quickly. "I should check on him. Would you like to meet my father?" Vincent followed her down a narrow hallway to a small bedroom where an older man lay propped up on pillows, his face gaunt and his breathing labored. But his eyes were sharp and kind when they landed on Vincent, and he managed a weak smile. "Father, this is Vincent Palmer. He helped me pray today during the storm." Grace moved to her father's side and adjusted his pillows with practiced care. "Did he now?" The older man extended a thin hand. "Thomas Rodriguez, any man who prays with my daughter is welcome in this house." Vincent shook his hand gently. "It is an honor, sir. Grace tells me you have been ill, dying more like," Thomas said with surprising frankness. "But I am not afraid. I have had a good life and I know my Grace will be all right. She is stronger than she thinks." "Father, do not talk like that," Grace said, but her voice lacked conviction. Thomas looked at Vincent with an appraising expression. "You are a cowboy, I take it, among other things." "I have done a bit of everything over the years, but yes, I know my way around horses and cattle." "Good." "Grace is going to need help with the ranch after I am gone. We have a small spread north of town, just 20 acres, but it is good land. She cannot run it alone." "Father, please," Grace said, tears welling in her eyes. "Hush now, girl, we both know the truth." Thomas turned back to Vincent. "I do not know you, but I trust my daughter's judgment. If she brought you home, there must be a reason. Will you stay and help her, at least until she gets things settled?" Vincent looked at Grace, seeing the mixture of grief and embarrassment on her face. He should have said no, should have mounted his horse and ridden away from this sudden responsibility, but instead he heard himself saying, "Yes, sir, I will stay as long as she needs me." The relief on Thomas's face was palpable, and he sank back against his pillows with a sigh. "Thank you. Now I can rest easy." Grace followed Vincent back to the kitchen, her arms wrapped around herself. "You do not have to do this. My father had no right to ask that of you. He is worried about you. What father would not be?" Vincent leaned against the counter and studied her. "But he is right, is he not? You will need help with the ranch." "I was planning to sell it," Grace admitted. "I know enough to keep the mercantile running, but ranching is different. I cannot do it alone." "Then let me help you, not because your father asked, but because I want to. I have been riding aimless for too long. Maybe it is time I put down roots somewhere, at least for a while." Grace searched his face, looking for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. "All right, but I insist on paying you properly. This would be a job, not charity." "Agreed." Vincent extended his hand, and Grace shook it firmly. That night, Vincent slept in the small barn behind the house, comfortable enough in the hay with his bedroll. He lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the desert at night and wondering what he had gotten himself into. He barely knew Grace Rodriguez, yet he had committed to staying and helping her through what was clearly going to be a difficult time. It was not like him to be so impulsive, but something about that moment in the rain had changed him. Watching Grace pray with such desperate faith had awakened something in Vincent that he thought had died with his brother. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Vincent woke early and found Grace already up, making breakfast in the kitchen. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she had not slept much. "How is your father?" Vincent asked. "The same. He had a rough night, but he is resting now." Grace cracked eggs into a pan. "I was thinking we could ride out to the ranch today if you are up for it. You should see what you are getting yourself into." After breakfast, they saddled horses and headed north out of Old Tucson. The Arizona landscape was stunning in the morning light, all red rock and hardy desert plants, with the mountains rising purple in the distance. Grace rode well, sitting her horse with the ease of someone who had been riding since childhood. They talked as they traveled, sharing stories and slowly learning about each other. The ranch, when they reached it, was small but well maintained. A modest house sat near a creek, with a barn and several corrals spread out behind it. Vincent could see cattle grazing in the distance, maybe 30 head, and a few horses in one of the paddocks. It was the kind of place a man could build a life, and Vincent felt an unexpected pang of longing. "My father built all of this himself," Grace said proudly. "He started with nothing but determination and a dream. It nearly killed him, but he made it work." They spent the day going over everything: the condition of the fences, the water sources, the livestock inventory. Vincent made mental notes of what needed immediate attention and what could wait. Grace proved to be knowledgeable about more than he expected, though she freely admitted her limitations. "I can handle the books and the basic care, but things like branding and breaking horses are beyond me," she said as they sat on the porch of the ranch house, sharing canteens of water. "My father always handled those parts. I can teach you some of it," Vincent offered. "If you are going to keep this place, you should know how to run it properly, if I keep it." Grace stared out at the land with a conflicted expression. "I am not sure I can. It feels too big without my father." "Give it time before you decide. You might surprise yourself." They rode back to town as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Vincent noticed that Grace seemed lighter somehow, less burdened than she had been that morning. Maybe it had helped to get away from the sickroom for a while, to focus on practical matters instead of grief. Over the following weeks, Vincent settled into a routine. He spent his mornings at the ranch, handling the necessary work and making repairs. Afternoons he often helped in the mercantile, which Grace struggled to keep running while caring for her father. And evenings he sat with Thomas, talking about the ranch and life and faith. Thomas was failing steadily, but he remained sharp and engaged, clearly determined to hold on as long as possible. Vincent and Grace grew closer during this time, their initial connection deepening into genuine friendship. Vincent found himself looking forward to their conversations, to the sound of Grace's laugh when he managed to coax it out of her, to the way her face lit up when she talked about something she was passionate about. He told himself it was just friendship, that he was simply helping someone in need, but deep down he knew it was becoming something more. Grace seemed to feel it too, judging by the way her eyes lingered on him sometimes, or how she found excuses to touch his arm when they talked. But neither of them spoke of it, both aware that this was not the time, not with Thomas dying and Grace's world falling apart. One evening about a month after they met, Vincent was sitting with Thomas while Grace closed up the mercantile. The older man had been quiet all day, and Vincent could see that he was struggling more than usual. "Vincent," Thomas said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to ask you something." "Anything, sir." "Do you believe in God?" Thomas's eyes were intense despite his weakness. "Truly believe?" Vincent thought about the question, remembering that day in the rain. "I did not for a long time, but yes, I think I do now, or at least I am trying to." "Good. Grace needs someone who believes, who can help her keep her faith when I am gone. She is stronger than she knows, but she will doubt herself. Promise me you will remind her to keep praying, to keep believing that things will work out as they are meant to." "I promise," Vincent said, feeling the weight of the vow, "and promise me you will take care of her. Not because she cannot take care of herself, but because everyone needs someone. She cares for you, you know. I can see it in the way she looks at you." Vincent's heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Sir, I would never presume. I am giving you permission to presume," Thomas interrupted with a faint smile. "More than that, I am giving you my blessing. Love my daughter, Vincent. Make her happy. That is all a father can ask." Vincent did not know what to say, emotions clogging his throat. Before he could find words, Thomas's eyes drifted closed and his breathing evened out into sleep. Vincent sat there for a long time, watching the older man rest and thinking about everything he had said. Grace returned home to find Vincent still sitting vigil. She took one look at her father's peaceful face and then at Vincent's expression, and something passed between them, an understanding that did not need words. "He is getting ready to let go," Grace said quietly, settling into a chair on the other side of the bed. "I can feel it. He is worried about you, I know. He has been trying to make sure I will be all right, arranging everything like he is packing for a long trip." Grace's voice broke slightly. "I do not want him to go, but I also do not want him to suffer anymore. Is that terrible?" "No, that is love," Vincent said. "Wanting what is best for someone even when it hurts you, that is what love is." Grace met his eyes across the bed, and Vincent saw tears streaming down her face. Without thinking, he stood and moved around to her side, pulling her into his arms. Grace clung to him and cried, all the grief and fear she had been holding back finally pouring out. Vincent held her tight, his own eyes burning, and wondered how he had come to care so deeply in such a short time. Thomas Rodriguez died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep with Grace holding one hand and Vincent holding the other. Grace was devastated but composed, having had time to prepare herself for the inevitable. She arranged the funeral with quiet efficiency, and it seemed like half the town turned out to pay their respects. Thomas had been well loved, and person after person told Grace what her father had meant to them. Vincent stayed close throughout it all, a steady presence that Grace leaned on without shame. After the burial, They returned to the house, and Grace finally fell apart, sobbing in Vincent's arms until she had no tears left. Vincent held her through it all, stroking her hair and murmuring comfort, and somewhere in those dark hours, they crossed the line from friends to something more. "I do not know what I would have done without you," Grace whispered when she could finally speak again. "You have been my rock through all of this. You would have been fine. You are the strongest person I know," Vincent said honestly, "but I am glad I could be here." Grace pulled back enough to look up at him, her eyes red and swollen but clearer than they had been in weeks. "My father liked you very much. He told me I should hold on to you if I had any sense. Did he now?" Vincent felt his lips twitch despite the somber moment. "He said you were the answer to my prayer that day in the rain, the help I asked God to send." Grace's hand came up to rest against Vincent's chest, right over his heart. "I think he might have been right." Vincent covered her hand with his own. "Grace, I need to tell you something. That day when I saw you praying, something in me changed. I had been empty for so long, just going through the motions, but watching your faith, your courage, it woke me up. And these past weeks, getting to know you, seeing how you handle hardship with grace, no pun intended, I have fallen for you. Completely and utterly." Grace's breath caught. "Vincent, I know the timing is terrible. You just lost your father, and I do not want to add pressure or confusion. But your father gave me his blessing before he died, told me to love you and make you happy, and I want to do that more than anything. So I am telling you now while I still have the courage. I love you, Grace Rodriguez. I want to stay here, build a life with you if you will have me." For a long moment, Grace just stared at him, and Vincent's heart hammered with fear that he had misread everything. But then she smiled, that brilliant smile that transformed her entire face, and pulled him down into a kiss. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and when they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling through their tears. "I love you too," Grace whispered. "I think I have since you knelt beside me in that storm and made me feel less alone. Stay with me, Vincent. Help me build something beautiful from all this grief." "For the rest of my life," Vincent promised and kissed her again. The weeks that followed were bittersweet. Grace grieved for her father, but she also began to heal, and Vincent was there for every step of it. They spent their days working on the ranch and in the mercantile, building a partnership that felt natural and right. Grace proved to be a quick learner, mastering skills Vincent taught her with determination and grace. Vincent, in turn, discovered that he enjoyed teaching, enjoyed watching Grace's confidence grow as she realized she could handle running the ranch. They talked about everything during those days, their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Vincent told Grace about the darkness he had felt after his brother's death, about how he had questioned whether there was any point to anything. Grace shared her own doubts and struggles, how she had sometimes felt trapped by her father's illness but guilty for feeling that way. "It is normal to feel conflicted," Vincent assured her one evening as they sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the stars come out. "Love is complicated. We can want someone to be free of pain even while we desperately want them to stay. Both things can be true at once." "You always know exactly what to say," Grace said, leaning her head against his shoulder. "How did I get so lucky?" "I am the lucky one," Vincent corrected, wrapping his arm around her. "You brought me back to life, Grace. Before you, I was just existing. Now I feel like I have a reason to be here." As summer turned to fall, Vincent and Grace's relationship deepened further. They were inseparable, and everyone in Old Tucson could see that they were meant for each other. The older women in town would smile knowingly when they saw the couple together, and more than one person told Grace how happy they were for her. Vincent officially proposed on a crisp October evening, getting down on one knee in the same spot where they had first prayed together. The town square was empty, the sun setting in a blaze of color, and Grace said yes before he could even finish asking. They held each other and laughed and cried, both overwhelmed by the rightness of it all. They were married a month later in the small church where Grace had worshipped her entire life. Grace wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her mother, altered to fit her frame, and she looked so beautiful that Vincent's eyes stung when he saw her walking toward him. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent felt like his heart might burst with joy. The reception was held at the ranch, with half the town in attendance. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat, and Grace laughed more than Vincent had ever heard her laugh. As the sun set and stars filled the sky, Vincent pulled his new wife into his arms and danced with her under the vast Arizona sky, both of them marveling at how much their lives had changed. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked, searching Grace's face. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Grace said truthfully. "I miss my father terribly, but I know he would be so pleased to see us." "He is here," Vincent said with certainty. "I can feel it, and he is smiling." They moved into the ranch house permanently after the wedding, selling Grace's house in town, but keeping the mercantile running with hired help. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent and Grace worked the ranch together, building the herd and improving the property. They laughed together and prayed together, and loved each other with an intensity that never seemed to fade. Vincent kept his promise to Thomas, always encouraging Grace to maintain her faith, to keep praying even when things were hard. They knelt together often, sometimes in the house and sometimes out under the stars, and Vincent found that his own faith grew stronger with each passing day. He had stopped believing in miracles after his brother died, but Grace was proof that miracles still happened. She had saved him just as surely as he had helped her. Winter brought challenges, as it always did in Arizona. There were cold nights and sick cattle, and 100 small crises that required immediate attention. But Vincent and Grace handled everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame. They learned each other's strengths and weaknesses, learned how to work together seamlessly, learned how to support each other when times were tough. One particularly brutal night in January, they lost 3 calves to the cold despite their best efforts. Grace was heartbroken, feeling like she had somehow failed, but Vincent held her and reminded her that they had done everything they could. "This is ranching," he said gently. "Sometimes we lose despite our best efforts, but look at how many we saved. Focus on that." "I hate feeling helpless," Grace admitted. "It reminds me too much of watching my father die." "I know, love, but you are not helpless. You are strong and capable, and you did everything possible. Sometimes that is all we can do, and we have to trust that it is enough." Grace nodded and leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "What would I do without you?" "You will never have to find out," Vincent promised, kissing the top of her head. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers and new life. The cattle that had survived the winter were healthy and strong, and several cows gave birth to robust calves that bounded around the pastures. Grace and Vincent worked from dawn until dusk, but they were happy, building something together that felt permanent and real. In April, Grace realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not wanted to say anything until she was certain. When she finally told Vincent, he picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy loud enough to startle the horses. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, his face split by an enormous grin. "Grace, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Grace asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Vincent said, cupping her face in his hands. You have given me everything, Grace. A home, a purpose, love, and now a family. I do not deserve you." "Yes, you do," Grace said firmly. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Vincent Palmer, and I am going to make sure you have it." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Grace tired more quickly as the months passed. Vincent was endlessly solicitous, always making sure she was comfortable and not overworking herself. He took on more of the physical labor without complaint, insisting that Grace rest when she needed to. Grace protested at first, unused to being coddled, but eventually she accepted his care with good humor. "You are going to spoil me," she teased one afternoon as Vincent brought her lunch while she was working on the books. "That is the plan," Vincent said seriously. "You are carrying our child, Grace. Let me take care of you." "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Grace pointed out, but she was smiling. "Humor me anyway." The baby arrived in late November, a healthy boy with Vincent's dark hair and Grace's gray eyes. They named him Samuel after Vincent's brother and Thomas for Grace's father. Vincent cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed by the perfection of the tiny human in his arms. "Hello, Samuel Thomas," he whispered, gently touching the baby's impossibly small fingers. "I am your papa, and I promise to love you and protect you always." Grace watched from the bed, exhausted but radiant. "He is beautiful." "Like his mother," Vincent said, carefully placing the baby in Grace's arms. "You are amazing, Grace. Thank you for this gift." "We made him together," Grace said softly, gazing down at their son with wonder. "Our little miracle." Being parents changed them both, deepening their bond in ways neither had anticipated. They took turns getting up with Samuel during the night, both functioning on very little sleep, but somehow managing. The ranch work continued, though at a slightly slower pace, and they learned to juggle the demands of a newborn with the demands of the land. Samuel was a happy baby, quick to smile and generally easygoing. Vincent was a natural father, patient and gentle and completely devoted to his son. Grace would often find him talking to Samuel, telling him stories or explaining how things worked, even though the baby was far too young to understand. "He is listening," Vincent would insist when Grace teased him about it. "Babies understand more than we think." "If you say so," Grace would reply, her heart full as she watched her husband with their child. As Samuel grew, so did the ranch. Vincent and Grace hired occasional help during busy seasons, but they managed most of the work themselves, their partnership as strong as ever. They continued to pray together regularly, teaching Samuel about faith from the time he was old enough to sit up. Vincent kept his promise to Thomas, making sure that prayer and belief remained central to their family life. When Samuel was 2, Grace became pregnant again. This time they had a daughter, a tiny thing with Grace's delicate features and Vincent's dimples. They named her Caroline Maria, and Samuel was immediately fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. "Gentle Samuel," Vincent would remind him as the toddler tried to pet Caroline's soft hair. "She is very small." "Baby sister," Samuel would say proudly, and Vincent and Grace would exchange amused looks. Life was full and busy and sometimes chaotic, but it was good. Better than good, it was everything Vincent had never dared to hope for. He had a wife he loved more than words could express, 2 healthy children, and a thriving ranch. He had purpose and meaning and faith. Sometimes, lying in bed at night with Grace curled against him and the sounds of their children sleeping down the hall, Vincent would think back to that rainy day in Old Tucson and marvel at how completely his life had changed. "What are you thinking about?" Grace murmured one night, sensing he was awake. "That day in the rain," Vincent admitted. "How lost I was before I found you, how close I came to just riding past without stopping. Grace propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. But you did not ride past. You stopped and you knelt down beside me and you prayed. That took courage. It took seeing you, Vincent corrected. Seeing your faith, your strength, your refusal to give up even when things looked hopeless. You inspired me, Grace. You still do. We inspire each other, Grace said, leaning down to kiss him softly. That is what makes us work. Vincent pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. I love you. More now than even on the day we married, if that is possible. It is possible, Grace said with certainty. Because I feel the same way. You are my answered prayer, Vincent Palmer. Every single day with you is a gift. They lay together in comfortable silence, both thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had not always been easy. There had been loss and grief and struggle, but they had faced it all together, their faith and love carrying them through. As the years passed, Vincent and Grace watched their children grow. Samuel developed his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination, while Caroline proved to be spirited and fearless, always getting into mischief. They had 2 more children after Caroline, another son named Jacob and a daughter named Ruth. The house was loud and messy and full of love, exactly what Vincent had always secretly wanted but never believed he could have. The ranch continued to prosper under their care. Word spread about the quality of their cattle, and they began to do substantial business with buyers from as far away as California. Vincent proved to be a shrewd businessman, though he always consulted with Grace before making major decisions. They were true partners in every sense of the word, each respecting the other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. The mercantile in town also thrived, managed by a young couple Vincent and Grace had trained. They checked on it regularly, but mostly they focused on the ranch and their growing family. Old Tucson itself was changing, growing from a small frontier town into a more established community. A railroad line had been proposed, and there was talk of bringing in more businesses and settlers. Through it all, Vincent and Grace maintained their tradition of praying together. They knelt together every evening after the children were in bed, thanking God for their blessings and asking for guidance. Sometimes the children joined them, their small voices joining in, and those moments filled Vincent with such profound gratitude that he could hardly speak. You remember what I was praying for that day in the rain? Grace asked one evening as they prepared for bed. The children were all finally asleep, and the house was blissfully quiet. For help, for guidance, for a miracle, Vincent said, pulling off his boots. I was praying for strength to face what was coming with my father, Grace elaborated. For some sign that I would be all right, that I could handle everything alone. And then you appeared. Vincent smiled. I was not much of a miracle, just a tired cowboy on a tired horse. You were exactly the miracle I needed, Grace said firmly. You gave me strength and companionship and love. You helped me through the worst time of my life and then gave me the best times of my life. If that is not a miracle, I do not know what is. Then we are each other's miracles, Vincent said, taking her hand. Because you saved me just as surely as I helped you. Before you, I was lost. Now I am found. They held each other, both reflecting on the improbable path that had brought them together. A rainstorm, a prayer, a moment of impulse that had changed everything. Neither of them took it for granted, understanding how easily things could have been different. When Samuel turned 16, he began to take on more responsibility at the ranch, learning everything Vincent could teach him about running the operation. He was a natural rancher, with an eye for cattle and a way with horses that reminded Vincent of himself at that age. Caroline, now 14, showed more interest in the business side of things, often helping her mother with the books and contracts. Jacob and Ruth, still young, were content to help where they could and enjoy their childhood. One evening, as Vincent and Samuel were mending fence together, Samuel asked the question Vincent had been waiting for years to hear. "Papa, how did you know Mama was the one? How did you know you wanted to spend your life with her?" Vincent paused in his work, considering how to answer. "I saw her praying in the rain and something in me recognized her. Not physically, though she was beautiful even soaked and muddy. It was deeper than that. I saw her faith, her courage, her refusal to give up even when she had every reason to. And I knew I wanted to be near someone who believed that strongly, who loved that deeply. Everything else grew from there." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "So you just knew?" "In a way, yes. But knowing and building are two different things. Your mother and I knew we had something special, but we had to work to build our life together. We had to learn each other, learn to communicate, learn to fight fair and forgive quickly. Love is not just a feeling, son. It is a choice you make every day, a commitment to keep showing up even when things are hard." "That makes sense," Samuel said. "I see how you and Mama are together. You are a team." "We are," Vincent agreed. "And that is what you should look for when you are ready to settle down. Someone who can be your partner, your best friend, your safe place. Someone who makes you want to be better than you are." Samuel grinned. "Like Mama does for you." "Exactly like that." As Vincent worked alongside his son, he felt a wave of contentment wash over him. This was what life was supposed to be. Family, purpose, love, faith. Everything else was just noise. He thought back to the bitter, lost man he had been before Grace, and he could hardly recognize himself. She had transformed him, and he had transformed her, and together they had built something extraordinary. That night, after the children were all in bed, Vincent found Grace sitting on the porch, staring up at the stars. He settled beside her and took her hand, neither of them needing to speak for a long moment. They had been together for so many years now that they could communicate in silence, understanding each other perfectly. "Samuel asked me today how I knew you were the one," Vincent said eventually. "What did you tell him?" "That I saw you praying in the rain and recognized you, that I knew I wanted to be near someone with that much faith and courage." Vincent brought her hand to his lips. "It is still true, you know. Every day I wake up grateful that I stopped that day, that I had the courage to kneel beside you." "I thank God for you every single day," Grace said softly. "For your love, your strength, your unwavering faith. You kept your promise, Vincent. You never stopped believing, and you helped me keep believing too." "It was easy with you beside me," Vincent said. "You make me want to be the man you think I am." "You already are that man," Grace said, turning to face him fully. "You were that man when you knelt in the mud beside a stranger and prayed with her. You were that man when you promised my father you would take care of me. You were that man when you held me while I grieved and loved me back to life. You have always been that man, Vincent. I just helped you see it." Vincent pulled her close, overwhelmed as always by the depth of his love for her. "I do not know what I did to deserve you. You showed up when I needed you most," Grace said simply. "You prayed with me in the rain and you never left. That is all any of us can ask for, someone who shows up and stays." They sat together under the stars, comfortable in the silence and in each other's presence. The desert night was cool and beautiful, the sky an explosion of stars that seemed close enough to touch. An owl hooted somewhere in the distance, and Vincent could hear the soft sounds of cattle settling for the night. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not stopped that day?" Grace asked. "Sometimes," Vincent admitted. "I think I would have kept drifting, kept searching for something I could never quite name. Eventually, I might have found work somewhere, settled in a half-hearted way, but I never would have had this. This happiness, this fullness, this purpose. I needed you, Grace. I needed your faith to rekindle my own." "And I needed you," Grace said. "I was so scared that day, so lost. I did not know how I was going to manage everything alone. And then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had not even finished praying yet. You gave me strength and hope and love, and you helped me see that I was stronger than I thought." "You were always strong," Vincent corrected gently. "You just needed someone to remind you." They fell quiet again, both lost in memories of that pivotal day. The rain, the mud, the desperate prayer, the quiet man who had knelt beside her without hesitation. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, and yet Vincent could remember every detail with perfect clarity. The way Grace's hair had clung to her face, the raw emotion in her voice, the moment their eyes had met and something had shifted irrevocably. "I want to pray with you now," Grace said suddenly, "like we did that first day." Vincent nodded and they knelt together on the porch, their hands clasped between them. They prayed aloud, taking turns, thanking God for their blessings and asking for continued guidance. They prayed for their children, for the ranch, for the community, for each other. And when they finished, they stayed kneeling for a moment longer, feeling the peace that always came after prayer. "I love you," Vincent said, helping Grace to her feet, "more than words could ever express." "I love you too," Grace said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "My cowboy who found me praying in the rain." "And never stopped believing," Vincent finished, echoing the words Grace had said to him years ago when she told him what he meant to her. They went inside together, checking on each of their children one last time before retiring to their own room. Vincent watched Grace brush out her long hair, the same dark hair that had been plastered to her face that rainy day, though now it was threaded with silver. She was even more beautiful to him now than she had been then, aged by time and life but radiant with happiness. "What are you staring at?" Grace asked, catching his eye in the mirror. "The most beautiful woman in the world," Vincent said without hesitation. "My wife, my partner, my answered prayer." Grace turned and held out her hand, and Vincent took it, pulling her into his arms. They swayed together gently, dancing to music only they could hear, and Vincent thought about how every good thing in his life had come from that single moment of faith. Faith to stop when every instinct told him to keep riding. Faith to kneel in the mud and pray when he had thought prayer was useless. Faith to open his heart to love when he had been so certain that love only led to loss. Grace had taught him that faith was not about having all the answers or never doubting. Faith was about showing up and doing the hard work even when you were scared, trusting that things would work out even when you could not see how. Faith was kneeling in the rain and praying for miracles and believing that help would come. And sometimes, miracles arrived in the form of a dusty cowboy on a tired horse, someone just as lost and broken as you were, someone who needed saving just as much as you did. They held each other as the night deepened, both counting their blessings and marveling at the life they had built together. 4 healthy children, a prosperous ranch, a love that had only deepened with time, and a faith that sustained them through everything. It was more than either of them had dared to dream about, more than they had thought possible. "Thank you," Grace whispered against Vincent's chest. "For what?" "For stopping that day, for praying with me, for staying, for loving me and building this beautiful life with me, for being the answer to my prayer." Vincent kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her. "Thank you for saving me, for showing me what faith looks like in action. For loving me even when I was lost, for giving me a reason to believe again." They eventually climbed into bed, settling into their familiar positions with Grace's head on Vincent's shoulder and his arm around her waist. It was how they had slept for years, finding comfort and security in each other's presence. Vincent lay awake for a while after Grace's breathing evened out into sleep, thinking about the incredible journey they had been on together. From that rainy afternoon in Old Tucson to this moment, lying in their ranch house with their children sleeping nearby, it had been an adventure neither of them could have predicted. There had been sorrows along the way, the loss of Grace's father, hard winters, sick animals, the normal struggles of life, but the joys had far outweighed the difficulties. Every challenge they had faced had only strengthened their bond, proving time and again that they were stronger together than apart. Vincent thought about his brother Samuel, wondered what he would think of the life Vincent had built. He liked to imagine that Samuel would be proud, would approve of the man Vincent had become. And Thomas Rodriguez, Grace's father, he was definitely smiling down on them from heaven, pleased that his daughter was happy and well cared for. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and the Palmer household sprang to life with the usual chaos of breakfast and chores and children getting underway. Samuel and Caroline helped with the ranch work while Jacob and Ruth helped their mother in the house. Vincent moved between tasks, helping where needed and supervising where appropriate, always keeping one eye on his family. After lunch, Vincent and Grace took a rare moment to ride out together, just the two of them. They headed toward their favorite spot, a small rise that gave a view of the entire ranch spread out below. Standing there, they could see all they had accomplished, all they had built together through hard work and determination and faith. "It is beautiful," Grace said, shading her eyes against the sun. "I still cannot believe this is ours." "Ours and God's," Vincent corrected gently. "We are just the caretakers." "True." Grace leaned against him. "I was thinking this morning about that verse, the one about delighting yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. I think that is what happened to us. We both desired purpose and love and faith, and God brought us together to give us all of it." "I think you are right," Vincent agreed. "Though I did not even know what I desired until I found you. I was so lost, I could not even articulate what I was searching for." "Sometimes we do not know what we need until God provides it," Grace said. "That day in the rain, I was praying for strength and help, but what God gave me was you. And you were so much more than I asked for, so much more than I ever dreamed." Vincent turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "You are everything to me, Grace. My wife, my best friend, my partner in all things. I meant what I said that night after your father died. I love you completely and utterly, and I will continue loving you for the rest of my life." "And I love you," Grace said, her eyes shining with emotion. "Today, tomorrow, always." "You are my miracle, Vincent Palmer. The cowboy who found me praying in the rain and who never stopped believing, not in God and not in me." They kissed there on the hillside, the wind stirring Grace's hair and the sun warm on their backs. Below them, the ranch sprawled out in all its beauty and promise. Their children were there somewhere, laughing and working and growing into the people they were meant to be. The cattle grazed peacefully, the crops grew strong, and the land they had worked so hard to improve flourished under their care. It was everything they had prayed for and more. A life built on faith and love, sustained by hard work and dedication, enriched by family and community. Vincent thought back once more to that desperate, empty man who had ridden into Old Tucson so many years ago, and he could hardly believe he had ever been that person. Grace had transformed him, and he had helped transform her, and together they had created something extraordinary out of grief and loss and unlikely beginnings. "Come on," Grace said, breaking into his thoughts. "We should get back before the children wonder where we have gotten to." Vincent nodded, but before they mounted their horses, he pulled Grace into one more embrace. "I love you," he said simply. "I know I say it all the time, but I need you to know that I mean it more every single day." "I know you do," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I love you just as much. more than I ever thought possible to love another person. They rode back to the ranch hand in hand when the terrain allowed, talking and laughing and planning for the future. There was always work to be done, always challenges to face, but they faced everything together, their partnership as strong as it had been from the beginning. And through it all, they continued to pray together, to believe together, to have faith that God would continue to guide their path. That evening, as they gathered for dinner with all 4 children around the table, Vincent looked at the faces of his family and felt his heart swell with gratitude. Samuel, nearly a man now, strong and responsible. Caroline, spirited and smart, already showing signs of the formidable woman she would become. Jacob, thoughtful and kind with an artist's eye for beauty. And Ruth, the baby, full of laughter and mischief and joy. And Grace, the center of it all, the heart of their family, the woman who had saved him and loved him and given him this beautiful life. "Shall we pray?" Vincent asked, and they all joined hands around the table. They thanked God for the food, for each other, for their health and their home and all their blessings. And Vincent added a silent prayer of gratitude for that rainy day in Old Tucson, for the impulse that had made him stop, for the courage to kneel in the mud beside a stranger and pray. Everything good in his life had flowed from that single moment of faith, and he would never stop being thankful for it. After dinner, the children scattered to their evening activities, and Vincent and Grace cleaned up together, working in the comfortable rhythm of long practice. They talked about small things, shared observations about the children, made plans for the next day. It was all beautifully ordinary, and yet Vincent treasured these quiet moments as much as the dramatic ones. Later, as they prepared for bed, Grace suddenly turned to Vincent with a mischievous smile. "Do you know what tomorrow is?" Vincent thought for a moment, running through dates in his mind, and then he remembered. "Our anniversary. 20 years since we married." 20 years, Grace repeated, wonder in her voice. 2 decades of marriage, 4 children, countless blessings. Who would have thought that rainy afternoon would lead to all of this? God knew, Vincent said with certainty. Even when we did not, he knew exactly what he was doing when he brought us together. Grace moved into his arms, fitting perfectly against him the way she always had. "I want to do something special tomorrow. Just the 2 of us. Maybe ride out to that spot where you proposed." "I would like that," Vincent said, kissing her softly, "though every day with you is special." "Charmer," Grace accused, but she was smiling. "It is the truth," Vincent insisted. "You make every ordinary day feel like a gift. That is your magic." They settled into bed, and Vincent held Grace close, thinking about the past 20 years and all they had been through together. The joy of their wedding day, the pain of losing Grace's father, the overwhelming happiness of holding each of their children for the first time. The hard years when money was tight and the work seemed endless, and the good years when everything came together beautifully. Through it all, they had loved each other, supported each other, believed in each other. They had kept their faith strong and their commitment stronger, and they had built something lasting and true. "Vincent," Grace's voice was soft in the darkness. "Yes, love. I am so glad you found me praying in the rain that day. So glad you had the courage to stop and kneel beside me. I do not know what my life would have been without you, but I know it would have been lesser somehow. You complete me." "And you complete me," Vincent said, his throat tight with emotion. "You are my home, Grace. Not this house or this ranch, but you. Wherever you are is where I belong." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, both at peace with the world and their place in it. Outside, the desert night was alive with sound. Crickets chirping, coyotes calling in the distance, the soft rustle of wind through the brush. Inside, the Palmer family slept safe and secure, surrounded by love and faith, and the knowledge that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The next morning, after seeing the children off to their various tasks with clear instructions, Vincent and Grace saddled horses and rode out alone. They packed a picnic lunch and made a day of it, riding slowly and enjoying the beautiful Arizona landscape. When they reached the spot where Vincent had proposed, they dismounted and sat together in the shade of a large rock formation, eating and talking and remembering. "I was so nervous that day," Vincent admitted. "I knew I wanted to spend my life with you, but I was terrified you might say no." "How could I say no?" Grace asked, genuinely confused. "You were everything I wanted and needed. You still are. I was just a drifter when we met. I had nothing to offer you but myself." "Yourself was all I wanted," Grace said firmly. "Your love, your faith, your strength, your kindness, those things are worth more than all the gold in California." Vincent pulled out a small package from his saddlebag. "I got you something for our anniversary. It is not much, but I saw it and thought of you." Grace unwrapped the package carefully to reveal a delicate silver cross on a chain. It was simple but beautiful, clearly handcrafted with care. "Oh, Vincent, it is perfect. Turn it over," Vincent urged. Grace flipped the cross and saw an inscription on the back. "Faith, hope, love." Proverbs 3:5. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding," Grace quoted, recognizing the verse. Her eyes filled with tears. "It is beautiful, it is perfect, thank you." Vincent helped her fasten the necklace and Grace touched the cross gently, her heart full. "I will treasure it always." "I have something for you too," Grace said, reaching into her own bag. She pulled out a small leather-bound journal. "I have been writing our story. Everything from that day in the rain until now. I thought our children should know how we met, how we fell in love, how we built this life. And someday, maybe our grandchildren will read it and understand that miracles still happen, that prayers are still answered, that faith still matters." Vincent paged through the journal, seeing Grace's neat handwriting filling page after page. She had captured everything: their first meeting, their courtship, their struggles and triumphs, their growing family. It was their legacy, written down for future generations. "This is incredible," Vincent said, his voice rough. "Thank you for doing this, for preserving our story." "It is a story worth preserving," Grace said. "A story about faith and love and never giving up. About a cowboy who stopped to pray with a stranger in the rain and ended up finding his purpose and his future. About a woman who asked God for help and received more than she ever dreamed possible. It is a good story, Vincent. It is our story." They spent the rest of the afternoon there, talking about their memories and their dreams for the future. They talked about watching their children grow and eventually start families of their own. They talked about growing old together, about sitting on the porch in rocking chairs and watching the sunset over the ranch they had built. They talked about faith and how it had sustained them, about prayer and how it had brought them together and kept them strong. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, Vincent and Grace knelt together in the dirt and prayed just as they had on that first day. They thanked God for 20 years of marriage, for their children, for their health and their home and their love. They asked for continued guidance and strength, for wisdom in raising their children for many more years together. And when they finished praying, Vincent pulled Grace to her feet and into his arms. "I love you, Grace Palmer. Today, tomorrow, and for all the days I have left on this earth. You are my miracle, my answered prayer, my everything." "And I love you, Vincent Palmer," Grace said, tears streaming down her face. "You are the man who found me praying in the rain and never stopped believing. You are my rock, my partner, my heart. Thank you for 20 beautiful years. Here is to 20 more." They kissed as the sun set behind them, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life full of love and faith and purpose. The desert stretched out around them, beautiful and harsh and full of promise, just like the life they had chosen. And somewhere in heaven, Grace liked to think, her father was smiling down on them, pleased that his daughter had found her happiness with a good man who loved her well. They rode home in the gathering darkness, the stars beginning to emerge in the vast Arizona sky. The ranch house glowed with welcoming light, and they could hear their children's voices as they approached. This was home, Vincent thought. Not just a place, but a feeling, a sense of belonging and purpose that he had searched for all his life and finally found in the most unlikely way. As they unsaddled the horses and headed inside, Grace took Vincent's hand. "Thank you for the best 20 years of my life." "Thank you for saving mine," Vincent replied. "I was lost before you, Grace, completely and utterly lost. You gave me direction and purpose and love. You gave me everything." They went inside together, greeting their children and settling into the evening routine. Dinner, conversations about everyone's day, cleaning up, preparing for bed. It was all wonderfully normal, and yet Vincent never took it for granted. He had seen too much loss, experienced too much loneliness, to ever assume that happiness was guaranteed. But he also had faith now, faith that God would continue to guide their path, faith that their love would endure whatever challenges came their way. Grace had taught him that faith was not about certainty, but about trust, about believing even when you could not see the way forward. And Vincent had learned to trust, to believe, to have faith that everything would work out as it was meant to. Years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays and the changing seasons. Samuel eventually married a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, and they gave Vincent and Grace their first grandchild, a little girl who looked just like her grandmother. Caroline followed her passion for business and eventually opened her own store in Old Tucson, proving to be as shrewd as her parents. Jacob discovered a talent for carpentry and built a thriving business making furniture and tools. And Ruth, the baby, eventually married a kind young man who worked at the bank and gave her parents 2 grandsons in quick succession. Through it all, Vincent and Grace remained the steady center of their growing family. They watched with pride as their children built their own lives, offering guidance when asked, but mostly trusting that they had raised them well. The ranch continued to prosper, though Samuel eventually took over most of the daily operations. Vincent and Grace gradually stepped back, content to advise rather than direct, to support rather than control. On their 30th anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter, and Vincent stood on the porch watching it all with a heart so full he thought it might burst. Grace came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his in the way she had done 1,000 times before. "What are you thinking?" she asked, though she probably already knew. "That I am the luckiest man alive," Vincent said honestly. "Look at all of this, Grace. Look at what we built. Not just the ranch, but this family, this legacy of love and faith. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "We built it together," Grace reminded him. "And it started with a prayer in the rain and a cowboy brave enough to kneel beside a stranger." Vincent turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. She was 60 now, her hair completely silver and her face lined by time and sun. But to Vincent, she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her kneeling in the mud. More beautiful, really, because now he knew her completely, knew the strength and courage and love that lived inside her. "I would do it all again," Vincent said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time." "And I would choose you," Grace said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "My cowboy who never stopped believing." They rejoined their family, and the celebration continued late into the night. There was music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. Grandchildren ran around chasing each other while their parents tried to maintain some semblance of order. Stories were told and retold, each generation adding their own perspective to the family history. Samuel stood up at one point and raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast to my parents. To two people who showed us all what love looks like in action, what faith looks like when tested, what family means. You built something beautiful, not just this ranch but the life you have lived together. Thank you for showing us the way." Everyone raised their glasses and echoed the toast, and Vincent saw tears in Grace's eyes. He squeezed her hand, his own eyes burning, and silently thanked God once more for that rainy day in Old Tucson, for the impulse that had changed everything, for the faith that had sustained them through 30 years of marriage and partnership. As the party wound down and family members began to leave, each one hugged Vincent and Grace and thanked them for the wonderful day. The grandchildren were carried out sleepy and content, and eventually the house grew quiet again. Vincent and Grace cleaned up together as they had done countless times before, comfortable in each other's presence. "That was a good day," Grace said, washing the last of the dishes. "One of the best," Vincent agreed, drying and putting things away. "Though I think I am getting too old for parties that last until midnight," Grace laughed. "We are not that old yet. Give it another decade or two." They finished cleaning and headed to bed, both exhausted but happy. Vincent lay beside Grace in the darkness, listening to her breathe, and counted his blessings once more. A good life, a great love, a family that would carry on long after he and Grace were gone. It was everything he had stopped hoping for before that rainy day when he had seen a woman praying with such desperate faith that it had awakened his own. "Grace," Vincent said softly, Thank you for letting me kneel beside you that day. Thank you for not sending me away." Grace rolled over to face him, though they could barely see each other in the darkness. "Thank you for having the courage to stop, for seeing me and really seeing me. For choosing to pray when you had every reason not to believe anymore. You saved me that day just as much as I saved you." "We saved each other," Vincent said, pulling her close. "And we have been doing it ever since." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, two people who had found love in the most unexpected way and nurtured it into something extraordinary. And if anyone had asked them the secret to their long and happy marriage, they would have said the same thing. Faith, trust, and the willingness to kneel in the rain and pray together, to believe even when things looked hopeless, to never stop choosing each other day after day after day. The years continued their steady march, bringing changes both welcome and difficult. Vincent and Grace grew older, slower, but no less devoted to each other. They spent their days mostly at the ranch, tending a small garden and enjoying their grandchildren when they visited. The larger operations of the ranch were left to Samuel and his family, but Vincent still liked to ride out and check on things, with Grace often accompanying him when her joints allowed. On their 40th anniversary, they returned to the town square in Old Tucson, to the very spot where they had first met. The town had grown and changed dramatically, but the square remained much the same. They stood there hand in hand, both thinking about that rainy day 4 decades earlier. "If someone had told me then that we would be standing here 40 years later, I do not think I would have believed them," Grace said softly. "I would have," Vincent said with certainty. "Because even then, even in those first moments, I felt like I had been searching for you my entire life." They knelt together right there in the square, not caring who might see or what anyone might think. They prayed together as they had done thousands of times before, thanking God for 40 years of marriage, for their family, for the life they had built together. And when they finished, they helped each other to their feet and shared a kiss that made them both feel young again. Vincent Palmer passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Grace beside him as she had been for 47 years. His last words to her were, "Thank you for everything. I will see you again." Grace held his hand as he slipped away, her heart breaking even as she thanked God for all the years they had been given. She lived another 5 years after Vincent died, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. She never remarried, telling anyone who asked that she had already had her great love, and one was enough for any lifetime. She spent her final years finishing the story she had begun so long ago, adding the final chapters about their life together, about watching their family grow, about the deep, abiding love that had sustained them through everything. Grace Rodriguez Palmer died on a rainy afternoon, sitting in her favorite chair on the ranch house porch. Her granddaughter found her there, a peaceful smile on her face and the old leather journal open in her lap. The last entry read simply, "A cowboy found me praying in the rain 48 years ago. He joined me and never stopped believing. Together we built a beautiful life, and now I go to join him again. Thank you, God, for every precious moment. Thank you for answered prayers and unexpected miracles. Thank you for Vincent." The journal was passed down through the family, each generation reading the story of Vincent and Grace and marveling at the faith and love that had brought them together. And in Old Tucson, now a city of considerable size, people still sometimes mention the Palmer Ranch and the couple who had built it from nothing but faith and hard work and devotion to each other. Their children carried on the legacy, teaching their own children about the importance of faith and family, and never giving up even when things seemed hopeless. The ranch continued to prosper for generations, a testament to the solid foundation Vincent and Grace had built. And whenever it rained in Arizona, which was not often, someone in the Palmer family would always remember the story of how it all began. With a prayer in a storm, a cowboy who stopped when he should have kept riding, and two people who chose to believe that miracles still happen. The love story of Vincent Palmer and Grace Rodriguez became part of family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a reminder that sometimes the most profound moments in life come disguised as ordinary ones, that faith can guide us to exactly where we need to be, and that true love, when nurtured and protected, can last not just a lifetime but echo through generations. And so the story ended as all good stories should, with love triumphant, faith rewarded, and a family forever changed by one rainy day when a cowboy found a woman praying in the rain, joined her, and never stopped believing.